Welcome to DWP 2022 session 19. Today we're going to talk about summoning the African spiritual hierarchy for societal development. This season, we're talking about whoever controls Africa also runs the world, and therefore Africans now are getting organized, not just to control Africa, but also inevitably to be the dominant cultural and economic force by mid of this century. So in episode 18, we discussed the message and went through the general theory for Africa's renaissance. In that discussion, we concluded that industrialization is not a technical process. Industrialization is the broad transformation journey that happens as society actually transforms at all levels. All cultures change as industrialization takes place. We also, in episode 18, agreed that for Africa, the answers lie within. Self-discovery is the most empowering knowledge because copying and pasting often doesn't do it. This requires an advancement of the consciousness of African people, and we talked about taking full cognizance of the metaphysical dimensions, because therein lies the unknown, the relationship between the known and unknown. Therein lies intuition and all manner of highly imaginative processes which lead to innovation and creativity. So the general theory for African Renaissance is based on the realization that every one of the 55 African countries is failing in the four major departments of society, starting with their social, cultural. We go to the politics and governance, then business and economics, the technology and environment. In all these areas, we are struggling. And I conjured up this general theory on the basis that if we have major constraints in all key departments of society, it probably then means that there's one causal reason. So it's actually good that we're not doing excellent in one area and so poorly in another. Then it's much more difficult to have broad-based change. So what is the single most important, deepest reason why we are suffering in all departments? Well, I concluded that it's because all our developmental strategies in Africa, in all departments, there is no cultural intelligence or African wisdom that is applied. We're just copying and pasting. The DNA of society is its culture and educational system, and the DNA was not only damaged through colonization, but we never repaired it. So it does not help to create society backwards. We agreed that historically African society was strong because of strong family systems, strong community systems. With strong family and community systems, inevitably the national systems become strong. Today is the opposite. We are trying to follow through the colonial legacy by figuring out how to have strong government systems, strong macroeconomic systems, when in actual fact, our families are crumbling, the community systems are decaying. So how do you build strong nations? On a foundation of weak family systems that are decaying and weak community systems, which are no longer even able to deal with basic issues like domestic violence and environmental protection. So we agreed that Western style science is good for some technical progress, but not so great an approach to societal development. Africa's main challenge is lack of access to power, to global power, because nations that are doing great in the world today is because they're monopolizing power in four major sources of power. The main source of power in the world, we agreed, is capacity to mete out violence. So the most militarily strong is the most powerful. They can have the most rotten of values, but that's where most of the power is. And we agreed number 2 was organized doctrines, whether they are in politics or religions. Second most powerful source of power. And thirdly, we agreed that it's actually money, because money can buy some of the above, and so on and so forth. Knowledge is number 4. It's supposed to be the most important, but there we go. We did agree that the unorthodox transformation in Africa, where urbanization is happening rapidly without much manufacturing, without jobs, Africa will not get out of that unorthodox process of economic transformation without some serious policy changes. And that's why in the message we were talking about massive changes that need to happen at policy level. This transformation does not just happen through elections and being good, human rights, etc. This requires massive change across all government sectors, having massive changes in the budget architecture so that it focuses on people. Development is about people and building their capacity to dream for themselves and to build strong families and strong communities. So on that basis, we concluded there is serious need for societal transformation, and that the metaphysical element which takes us to the spiritual hierarchy that Africans need to draw upon is what brings us to episode 19 today. We have to summon, that is the argument here, the African spiritual hierarchy for societal development. So my name is Mandi Rukuni. I authored this book, Being African, which I'm recommending to you. You stand a chance of winning a copy of this book in the DWP competitions. But I wrote this book primarily because we Africans often confuse Westernization with modernization. So this book goes through what it takes for us to modernize Africa using our heritage rather than Westernizing it. So Wunu, Botu, Ubuntu, Udugu is what this book is about. I recommend it to you highly, and those who want the practical side of how to succeed using heritage values, you can go to the small handbook of African Pathways to Success. Look forward to you participating in the competition. Thank you.
Stand a chance to win a copy of the book Being African or the booklet African Pathways to Success by subscribing to our YouTube channel Dialogue with Prof Mandi Rukuni and leaving a comment on one of our recent videos. You can also like our Facebook page and comment on a recent post. If you're on Instagram, follow the profile Prof Mandi Rukuni and leave a comment on a recent post as well. A random participant will be chosen at the end of the month and will be contacted and given the book.
So what are the facts here? Number 1, let's just go back to why we are invoking African spiritual hierarchy, because Africans have always been highly spiritual people. So what do I mean by that? The culture was always rich in tribal traditions, beliefs, rituals, ceremonies were abound. The spiritual roots were very deep. Ancestors were important. Mythology, legend. In fact, mythography was one of the greatest skills of all African nations, able to inspire and upgrade a whole clan or family through legend. So spirits played and continue to play a dominant role in the life of individuals, family, and community. The belief system I'm talking about here in Africa is one that sees life as a whole as just a multiplicity of spiritual combinations, and that each and every individual thing, be it a person, a family, a community, a nation, an organization, is driven by a range of spiritual energy. So the spiritual energy has this capacity to diversely multiply within even an individual entity, because that's how we were created. The behavior of animals, the behaviors of people, flora, can therefore be understood as a result of the interplay between a few of the dominant spiritual energies amongst many. And that's why we're going to talk about this hierarchy, because it's just a spectrum. This is just a way of how Africans would explain the relationship between the spiritual world and the physical world. So let's just, before we go into the spiritual hierarchy itself, understand how we use this as a model, because I present this as a model for use. We don't present it as religion, we present it as spiritual representation. And what I mean, let me give you a simple example. But Africans will say, this one is a witch. This person is a witch. Well, they don't necessarily mean that this one gets up in the middle of the night and can fly and disappear and poison people at night. They mean the spirit that they exhibit at times is that one of a witch. So this is how we use this model in a sense that even at interpersonal level or group or inter-community level, relations are guided by some dynamic equilibrium between these competing forces, which every entity possesses. Every individual, every animal, every tree, every entity that has been created in this universe possesses a spectrum of these spirits, according to this model. And at any time, one or two can dominate. So today I can be a witch. Tomorrow I'm God, I'm such a nice person. Every entity possesses this spectrum of spirits. So we use in this model spirit in its representational sense. So as I go through the spiritual hierarchy, I'll basically start with the lowest form of spiritual energy, the most negative, all the way up to the highest. And you will find by the time I go through with this that it is just a representation. Anyone can recreate this model. I probably use 6, 7 of these representations, but you could come up with more. The important point is just showing how in the African psyche of spirituality, that spiritual energy is all over diverse and can lead to a series of energies within a same individual competing. So let me therefore give you my rendition of the spiritual hierarchy. And as I've said, if you understand the basic model that I'm using here, you can also create your own afterwards. It's not fixed. It just allows us to have an approach to even diagnosing situation that we face. So in general, you'll find that in African spiritual hierarchies, the lowest form of negative energy is that of a witch. So the witch, which in my language is Mroi, Mtakati in Zulu and Nguni languages. I understand in Swahili is Mchawi, Aje in Yoruba. Why do I say Mtakati, Muroi, the witch is the lowest spiritual energy force? Because the witch is the only spirit that will do damage to others for no reason at all. Other spirits are responding to something, but the witch spirit is one of somebody who just enjoys creating havoc. And it's not a problem. We have these spirits everywhere, in the family, in your organization, at national level. You will see these spirits. At work, everything goes well, everybody's doing okay. Until this individual shows or does something, they just do it for the sake of, they love to see chaos being created. So that's the lowest spirit. The next spirit, as we go better and better, is the avenging spirit, which in my language is Ngozi. Ingozi in Zulu. I'm sure for the different African languages there will be an appropriate term. But you see that the difference between Ngozi and Muroi, Mtakati, is that Ngozi at least doesn't kick in at the time it is offended. A lot of individuals actually get offended, but they always give a benefit of the doubt. They think maybe there was something else happened. I step on your foot first time, you probably think, oh, maybe you just made a mistake or your foot was in the wrong place. And then I step on you again, and then you start wondering what's going on. By the time I step on you the third time, you now realize this guy is messing around with me. And once the Ngozi spirit kicks in to revenge, it is seeking restorative justice. It's now trying to correct what appears to be repetitive offense. And that, that spirit, when it kicks in, it can be ruthless. But it doesn't mean to say it was originally a bad spirit. It just now fed up and now seeks retribution and restoration of justice. So quite often in our African traditions, find ways of appeasing the offended groups or the offended individuals, but by applying socially acceptable measures to then compensate those who have been aggrieved or offended. Quite often, that is the most important peacemaking initiative or ritual in most African social groups. Once somebody has been offended sufficiently, and there is all these social processes to ensure that this issue is addressed, quite often there is some form of compensation. There's some form of even ritual which says, okay, you killed one of ours, now to make sure that the Ngozi or this spirit is diluted and doesn't come back to haunt us, compensation is sufficient, or no, it's not until it's sufficient. I mean, almost all African countries have experienced a situation where they are, even at national level, upheavals which, when they happen, if they're not eventually sufficiently addressed and socially acceptable measures are put in place, it's difficult. I mean, I can think of at a fairly high strategic level is just the effects of colonialism, that if you then look at what it meant at a lower level, take South Africa, which was the last country to be kind of liberated. And there was a peace and reconciliation efforts, the late Desmond Tutu did a fantastic job, but was there really socially sufficiently acceptable social solutions to the problem? No, because the main effects of apartheid still continued to exist. So the Ngozi, spirit, the Ngozi doesn't go away just by cosmetic measures. There's need for deep dialogue and deep compensation. The next spirit up the ladder is the war spirit. Now, by war spirit, I don't know in other languages. In my language, Jukwa is an example of a war spirit. Now, a war spirit is one like that, good and bad. It's only good to the extent that Africans believe that if there's protracted disagreement and dispute, who is the boss, who is in charge, or who's been wronged, then a fight may have to be invoked to solve the problem. I mean, it happens. But in most African cultures, you only fight, you only go to war for a good purpose, and you stop the war as soon as the issue is resolved. That's why in Africa we never really had genocide the way we had it after colonization, where you get a quote-unquote tribe trying to eliminate another tribe. That never happened before. It was just fights, competition, the other one wants to dominate the other. Once the fight is over, there's integration. So the war spirit is good in that sense. The war spirit is bad when it is invoked all the time. It's ceaselessly invoked. In fact, the war spirit becomes a problem when it also ceases to want to see peace. So some kind of divide and rule, as an example, and we can also go back to colonization and also other forms of what you might call conflicts in Africa today, you find that the war spirit is invoked because once you create war, a crisis, then the powerful are able to control and intervene all the time. So that's the war spirit. The next spirit up is the family, ancestral or clan spirit. Now, this is fascinating. It's one of the most important spirits in African tradition. This is the spirit which says, this one belongs to you. Omkaya in Zulu, I understand. As long as is one of yours, you will die for them. If they're not one of yours, you won't die for them. So let me give you an example. My own clan is the Moyondizo clan. And I can tell you, just like all the other clans, we love ourselves, we protect each other. And I can tell you right now, if as I'm talking to you now, if somebody walked through the door and started attacking me, all the Moyos in here who are watching now would just jump on the guy and panel the guy to death. They don't even have to find out the reason why he's attacking, because you're protecting yours, you're protecting somebody in your group, somebody in your family. You only ask afterwards, what happened. So it's the family spirit or clan spirit is also good and bad. It's good to the extent that you defend yourselves, you protect your own, and you defend and ask questions later. It's bad when it is used to the extreme, so that you find afterwards that the reason why the guy was attacking me is because I stole all his cattle last night. Then all of a sudden you are faced with one of yours, whom you have to either discipline or ensure that you cannot continue to protect them when they continue to do wrong things. But you see in families, you see this in organizations. You have worked in various organizations. You're going to see that in this department, the people in the design department don't talk to the marketing, and it can be so bad. You just protect your own, and you don't focus on the issues. As you can see, my hierarchy, the spirits are getting better and better, but still, you'll see the good side and the bad side of each of the spirits. Next level up is the wandering spirit, which in my language is Shave. I think in Zulu they call it Umoya or Zula Zulayo. In other words, it's a wandering spirit. It's not your ancestral spirit. It's not your own clan spirit. That's in the religious sense, so that you can understand the representational sense. So it's a spirit or spirits that wander around, and for you as an individual, for you as a family, for you as a nation, this is good and bad. It's good to the extent that you can be possessed with a foreign spirit if it jives in with the situation and what you're trying to achieve. In most African traditions, you find that even if within your own ancestral group, you didn't have skilled warriors, you didn't have skilled carpenters, you didn't have skilled builders, you didn't have much skill in farming, but all of a sudden now you are possessed with this skill. It then is then welcome, is then used to enhance our own existing spirits. The Shave is not so good when one is not able to deal with all these wandering spirits. You don't get settled down. You find that you're always chasing shadows. So once again, at organizational level, at national level, we have seen how Mashave, meaning many of these Shaves, can distract the nation, chase this, chase that. Meanwhile, the family or the organization or the nation is not harnessing any of those skills for their own use. So for Africa, the lesson would be, I'll say a bit more at analysis stage, is if we're going to chase foreign spirits, if you're going to be wandering around trying to figure out these foreign spirits, Well, it has to do with allowing the positive ones that you don't have, that allow your nation, your family, your organization to do things that you weren't able to do before and then do them passionately. So that is basically the wandering spirits. We're still going up. The next level is what you might call, in my language, is the Sikiro, or the prophet, if you used it in religious terms. But in reality, the idea is that there are some people who are so gifted, they're so connected spiritually, they are connected even to the divine, they're connected to the ancestors, and they're able to commune with the divine and be able to help the rest of the family, the rest of the community, the rest of the nation to harmonize the spiritual world and the physical world. This is a highly respected skill in African society. In practical terms, people with capacity to see things ahead of time, because they are good at social analysis, you don't have to be possessed all the time. So in representational terms, a Sikiro or a prophet, you don't need magical powers necessarily. In representational terms, it's the spirit that energizes some people to continue to want to read the situation, be able to continue to see where we are going into the future as family, as nation, as organizations. These are highly valued spiritual energies. And once again, I could go on and on for this, but in most African societies, people with this type of gifts are given so many roles because they lead the community sometimes from the front, sometimes in the middle, sometimes on the back, because they understand where the welfare of the community is. They also sometimes mediate the spiritual world, the divine part of the world, and us today. They are able to understand what the sources of the complications that come to our organization or our society and help to maintain equilibrium. So there is a whole bunch of fairly important roles that this particular energy is assigned to. Next up is the hunter spirit, Muvimi Vadzimba. This is one of the highly valued spirits in African spiritual hierarchy, because if you don't have a hunter in your family, you are going to starve. If you don't have a hunter in your organization, somebody who will go out there and get all the deals and be able to make fantastic deals, structure them, and be able to bring home the meat, the food, you are going to starve. Your organization is going to die. If your nation is not led by hunters, people who know how to hunt and bring the food back to the people, not for them just to eat and be full, but to hunt for the nation, to see massive, inclusive progress happening. This spirit of entrepreneurship is at every level. The hunter spirit is everywhere, in business, in economics, social entrepreneurship. That all is a hunter spirit that goes out because they see a need within the community, the family. That hunter spirit is something that Africa needs to fully understand how it works for everybody rather than for a few individuals. Moving forward into a future Africa where it's culturally and economically most dominant in the world is very much dependent on us spending more time understanding this hunter spirit that brings out the genius and the spirit of entrepreneurship. Next up, we're getting closer and closer to the apex, to God, to the Creator. But the next one is the Rainmaker spirit. The Rainmaker, unlike the hunter is a serious worker, the hunter is restless until they bring They bring food back to the family. The Rainmaker is further up. Actually, the Rainmaker doesn't do much. In Shona, Gombra is an example of a Rainmaker spirit, because a Rainmaker spirit is a spirit that just aligns all the energies. Because if you go back to where this comes from in the religion, it's the rain-making spirits. It all happens differently in different African cultures, but what's common is that the ability with very little effort to impact on the various cosmic energies that make it possible to see clouds forming where there were none, and to see rain coming down, to bring the most important life-giving energy to the community, to humankind, rain. Rainmakers are there for people who don't do much. Their presence, their personal vibration does it. That most of the time these people don't have to say anything. They don't have to do anything. But I mean, I remember back in the village, you'd have a typical thing is this: you're outside, your mother is preparing the next meal, and if somebody with a witch spirit is coming through, everybody will look down, they'll greet them, they'll try to do anything for them to just proceed with their journey. But if a Rainmaker is approaching, everyone encourages them to visit, to come home, offer them anything. If they just sit down with you in your own home, you are blessed. That's the Rainmaker. They bring good things to the family, to the community, to the business. Rainmakers bring big, great clients to your business. They are literally magical energies. And finally, at the apex, we have the creator, Musikavanu, Mwari in Shona. The real Mwari that we had before colonization. I know after colonization, there was a massive spiritual fraud, and what the Christians and the Muslims did was then they literally, fraudulently took Mwari and made them a biblical god, when in actual fact Mwari is an African god. Nkulunkulu in Zulu. I think it's Muumba or Mungu in Swahili. Now, this is the God spirit. Once again, Africans always knew that every individual has got all these spirits, including the God spirit. You wouldn't exist as a person, as a dog, as a tree, as a flower. Nothing exists without God spirit inside it. But it takes a physical entity like a human being to be able to surface that spirit amongst all these repertoire I'm talking about, for that spirit then to be the dominant one. So that's the hierarchy. And I'll be back shortly with the analysis as to how Africa could harness the most positive of these spiritual forces for its advancement into the next economic superpower and the most dominant cultural force in the world by the middle of this century. See you shortly on analysis. Bye. So welcome back to the analysis section on the Afrikan Spiritual Hierarchy. So let me just explain how this model can be useful both for diagnostic purposes as well as for strategy development. So in European religion of Christianity, there is God and there's the devil. In African religions, there's just God and a whole manner of lower level spirits. There's no devil. So what then happens is the God spirit is surrounded by all these other spirits, which are at different levels of what you might call purity or effectiveness. But in reality, all of them are necessary for life. Even the bottommost one, the witch spirit, which is the spirit that does damage, that creates chaos for no good reason, just for the fun of it. Even that is needed. So in African wisdom, the most important thing that if you see a witch or somebody with a witch spirit is how you manage all these spirits. Have to be managed. So at the high level, part of the diagnostic and strategic use of this model, you would say that of these 8 to 10 spirits that we're talking about here in this hierarchy that I presented, there's normally at least 2 to 3 which are dominant at any time. So if you, in an individual, there will be 1, 2, or 3 spirits competing. Usually a dominant one and another 2 out of the 8. The same in a family, in a community, in a nation, in a business, in an organization. You are looking out for what the dominant spirits are, and they are usually 2 to 3. So the important thing is to be able to diagnose at each point in time which ones are the dominant spirits, and then how do you manage the negative ones so that you're slowly moving as a family, as an individual, as a nation, as a continent towards the more positive ones. So, as I say, in that sense, all the spirits have a role to play. Even the Mtakati, the Mroi, the witch, has a role to play. So let me give you an example. You know, in every African village, there's a witch. If there's no witch in the village, one will be created because it's a requirement. Why? Because things are going to happen in the village which cannot be easily explained. And the witch is going to be found accountable. At least we should be able to explain it to the witch. But that's on the negative side. But on the positive side, we say in our village, if you're a witch, okay, too bad. We'll allow you to stay on one condition. You only witch outside. Go and witch in the other villages. You don't witch our children and our own people here. And if we in the village find that the witch behaves himself or herself, only does damage far away, then we are fine. We have managed the witch spirit. In fact, at times we might even find this to be an important weapon of mass destruction. We can threaten others, and we can always boast about our witch being able to deal with our own detractors. You see? So even the witch has a role to play in African spirituality. Now, the Ngozi, or the Avenging Spirit, as I said earlier, that's typical. On a daily basis, friends, family, at national level, this whole story, and like I say, whole departments, when we talk social, cultural, we deal with these spirits. Political governance is where the colonial system has damaged us most, because now with this electoral type of democracy, there's little room for serious engagement and discussion, for instance. So whoever wins the election, the winner takes it all. There's no deep dialogue anymore. There's just us and them. And that's why you find that the witch spirit and the Ngozi, or avenging spirits, are on the increase on the African continent. There is more foreign religions and less peace. But like I said earlier, all these spirits are invoked in the way we analyze our nations. And I did a social experiment as I was promoting the book behind this. I remember I've done it in several countries, but you'll be interested to know that I did this social experiment in the United States with a group of youngsters who, after the end of the exercise, they were quite excited by this model, by the way. And I said, okay, let's analyze the United States as a nation. Which are the dominant spirits of the whole nation? Do you know what they came up with? At the top of the list was, it's a hunter spirit, a highly entrepreneurial spirit in the United States. Number 2, war spirit. They said, although we have fantastic hunter spirit, we have a very aggressive war spirit. War is almost part of the entrepreneurial hunter spirits. There you are. They were able to analyze it. Nothing wrong with that. But you see what I mean. Africans now, as we go for the dominant culture in the world, for the dominant economic force in the world. We have to be analyzing the repertoire of these spirits at every level, at individual level, family, community, business, nation, province, district, whatever it is, and then find ways of diluting the negative spirits and enhancing the positive ones. There you go. And we can apply that so that overall we can see whether we are achieving the major strategies, which in African sense, the most important element or outcome of strategy is one, peace. Because without peace, there's nothing much else that can be achieved at national level or even at community level. So peace is what leads to prosperity. So peace is fundamental for prosperity. And once prosperity is abound and most people are able to experience a better life, then freedom. Freedom means you are relieved from basics of where am I going to get food? Where am I going to sleep? So in that order, peace, prosperity, freedom, and happiness. So that's that for the analysis. I'll be back shortly for the conclusion. So in conclusion, Africa should summon these African spiritual hierarchies for societal development as a diagnostic tool and as a strategic tool. Because whoever in Africa controls this hierarchy of spiritual energies, dilute the negative ones, promote the positive ones, we are going to accelerate the pace at which Africa becomes a cultural force and dominant economy by the middle of the century. It is through this slow and conscious improvement of the spiritual repertoires and energies in our society that will repair the damaged DNA, because the transformation we're talking about, societal transformation, is entirely reliant on cultural software. So let me just say, Africa just needs to improve the software, because we adopted other people's software, damaged and not quite suiting our circumstances. So you can't take IBM software and stick it into Apple software, and then you are surprised. 6 decades we've gone down this African so-called independence, but it's the wrong software in the wrong hardware. So the spiritual hierarchy, in conclusion, is the way. This is the message, wake-up call, that is only through improved intellectual products from Africans. It's the spiritual and intellectual poverty that's our problem. It's not incompetence. It is the wrong software. So what is needed in the end are strategies to, once again, put front and center energies that produce strong family systems, strong community systems, before you can even talk about strong national systems. That's the forgotten treasure, and that's it. I look forward to talking to you again in the next session. Bye.